You got the introduction last week. This is session 2, which is basically going over the evidences, because what we are trying to do is lead into a teaching training, a teacher training for people that want to teach their own families, maybe a Sunday school class, wherever God would have them be able to share with somebody else. And so we feel so important to get the basics down. And so if this is a review for some of you, please forgive us. It is a review. And so this week, we'll be talking about design. Next week, you see a picture of Brian there. His big love, I think, is astronomy. And I think that's next week, isn't it, Mary Jo?
Yep, I think so.
All right. So like I say, that's an in-person creation training week coming up April 4th through 8th. It's right here at the AOI headquarters in Grand Junction. And so we're hoping some of you can join us for that. And that week is going to be so much fun because we are going to be not covering the same things, but we will cover some other aspects of the various topics. But we're going to focus a lot on hands-on work, hands-on teaching, hands-on practice. We're going to be taking field trips to the Colorado National Monument, look at all those gorgeous canyons. We're going to be at the Dinosaur Museum. We might even get the Black Canyon of the Gunnison, but we're going to take several little things like that. We'll be partly focusing in on what type of ministries you can do, including children's ministry. So we have a session with the Johnsons on children's ministry as well. There's another thing that's important, and that is the amazing creation tours. Besides the Colorado National Monument that you can see in this picture, AOI headquarters is right down here in that valley. But besides that, we're going to be taking the weekend afterwards, April 9 and 10, for 2 different creation tours of Arches National Park and Canyonlands National Park. And we'll be caravanning over there. We live in the heart of the Canyonlands, beautiful evidence of a flood all the way through there. And so that's what's going on in the coming week. We asked that question, is believing in creation important? Why or why not? And is it important to tell others? Yeah, we talked about, have you experienced times where you have realized that believing in creation is important? And I think that's why you're on this call, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, I thought so. The homework for last time, you'll just have to catch up. But we want you to read Genesis 1 through 11 and share some kind of creation nugget with a friend. Invite them to attend this class. Because even if they start 3rd week or 4th week, remember, they can watch the replays and get caught up, right? And do some surveys. Find 3 friends and say, can I ask you a survey? That's part of my class. And does it really matter what you believe? Does it matter what other people believe? Do you think that God created the world? Why or why not? And then what's your evidence for it? And so those are the questions we are asking people to do. So Mary Jo, I'll turn it right back over to you. And then we're going to look at a video from Lanny, a short little video.
Yeah, we looked at why are we doing this training? Well, it's evidence, yes. And that kind of stuff, we believe we can get on video and that kind of thing. And that's great. But the reason we want to do the in-person is because that way we can actually share a lot more hands-on kinds of stuff and go on field trips and have the participants present different parts of the seminars and so on. And so we're doing this training because it's extremely important. We believe that creation is the foundation both of understanding science and of understanding the biblical record correctly. Genesis 1 through 11 is really foundational. I got really messed up when I went to college. I was a believer in Jesus, but at the same time, I was believing in evolution, and it really messed up my faith. I wasn't quite as logical as some or many college students are. Many college students will tell us, well, if evolution is true, that means the Bible is false. Who needs God? Who needs the Bible? Who needs creation? And the logical thing to do, if evolution really could explain the origin of the universe and the origin of all the plants and animals and everything else, the origin of human beings, if it really could do that, then who really needs God? You know, we're really God unto ourselves then. And we're just part of randomness and natural selection. I praise God I didn't throw out my faith, but I was sure mixed up about this creation evolution issue. And it wasn't until we were teaching, we were teaching up in a small school in Alaska, and I got a hold of a little book called Evolution, the Fossils Say No by Dr. Gish. And I bought that book for 5 cents in a secondhand store, but that's what turned our lives around and really got us started doing some thinking and doing some research. And after a period of time, we believed God was calling us into a creation ministry to share with others. We founded the Alpha Omega Institute in 1984, and since then been doing seminars and events and camps and tours all around the country and around the world. And we're now blessed to have others doing it with us, the Johnson's family and the Stepanics. Some of you know them, Brian and Scott also. And so we're not big like Answers in Genesis or ICR, but God has really multiplied what we've been able to do with a small staff. And so we're interested in training others to be able to carry on in their own areas, sharing about creation and about what God has done. Now, some people are, like I said, are a little more logical than I am. You're going to hear the testimony by Lanny Johnson. And Lanny was saved when he was in a vacation Bible school, but he went far from his faith to the point that he claimed to be an atheist for 20 years. And you'll hear his short testimony here about, you know, why he thinks creation is so important and how he came to understand about creation.
Hi, my name's Lanny Johnson. When I was a young boy, 9 years old, I came to know the Lord Jesus Christ. According to my mother, she said I was on fire for the Lord and I was going to be the next Billy Graham. But when I got to college, something changed my life. I became a geologist, and during my studies, my professors were teaching evolution, which teaches there is no God. We're just a process of chance and accident. So I had to make a choice because the Bible and evolution were two completely different ideas. So I made a choice, and that choice was that evolution had to be true, so the Bible couldn't. So I took my Bible and I threw it away. And when I did that, I quit believing in God. And I became an atheist for 20-some years. But when I was 40 years old, I went to a seminar by Dave and Mary Jo Nutting, Alpha Omega Institute. And during that time, I learned lots of different ideas. Now, I didn't really believe what they were teaching, but they opened up my mind enough that I began to asking some questions. What's the evidence? I was consumed. I went back and I studied and studied. And at the end of my studies, I came to the conclusion that I had bought into a big lie. And that lie was evolution. There was no way we happened by chance and accident. All the evidence pointed to, well, a creator, and that creator had to be God. And I had known who that God was when I was younger. And because of that, I turned back to my Bible. And from that experience, creation led me to not only who made me, but to my Savior, Jesus Christ. And through creation, I came to know the Lord Jesus truly for the first time. Thank you. Hi, my name.
And Lanny has, I'll tell you what, Lanny is still a real evangelist. You heard him say there, his mom said he was going to be the next Billy Graham. Well, you might almost think he is that in a creation sense, and leading children to the Lord, using the creation evidences and using the Bible and showing how they fit together all the way from Genesis 1 through 11 and on up through the gospel in the Gospels. And so for Lanny, this was an extremely important issue, and it is for so many others, that it's not, some people say, well, is it a creation, is creation a salvation issue? And I go, well, not directly. I mean, we don't have to answer a test on creation or evolution when we get to the pearly gates, but it is a salvation issue for so many people, in that it is the biggest stumbling block that students run into that keeps them from believing in what the Bible has to say. And in that way, it can become a salvation issue because it keeps them from even considering the claims of Jesus. When we look at creation from a point of science and a point of biblical understanding, you can go back one, Dave. We like to look at the Genesis 1 through 11 as the overview, you might say, the outline of history. And so in Genesis 1 and 2, we read about God's creative events, the things that God did during that creation period, which we believe is a week, the way that it speaks about in Genesis. The days are real days, we believe, and there's good evidence for that we can go into, but not right now. But Genesis 1 and 2 talk about creation and design. And so what we would expect to find, if God is creator, then we expect to find creatures that are marvelously designed and that will work, that come functionally complete at the end of the creation time. And so Genesis 1 and 2 we look at as creation and design. And everything at the end of that creation period was very good, it says in Scripture. But something happened, didn't it? And those of you that know the Scripture know that in Genesis 3, there's an event that is called the fall. God gave Adam and Eve one rule: don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And God told them that they would die if they did. Well, we know the story. Satan came in the form of a serpent and tempted Eve. And the first thing he did was to get her to doubt and question and doubt the word of God. And then he began to just outright fly in the face of God and call God wrong. And basically, then he implied that God did not have their best interest at heart, that God was somehow cruel, that he was withholding something from them. Well, Adam and Eve took the bait and she ate that fruit, and along with her, Adam chose to eat that fruit. And we know when he did, it says in the New Testament that by Adam's sin, death came into the world. And so Genesis 3, we see the entrance of death. And then as we go on in the other chapters there, we read more and more about the impact of sin in the world. And we get to the genealogies and over and over and over again. And he died, and he died, and he died. So Adam's sin brought death into the world, and along with it, the suffering and pain and disease and all the other things that we deal with in the world today. And we read in Scripture that this wickedness and sin multiplied until the whole earth was covered with wickedness. The whole earth, all of the human population, it seems, had followed the sinful ways. And God said, enough is enough. He's going to bring judgment on the world to wipe out and start all over again. But he found Noah. It says Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah was a righteous man. He believed in God. He trusted in God, and God gave him the command to build the ark. And of course, it looks like it took him about 120 years to do it. And I think the reason it did is he was all that time preaching. He spent so much time preaching, he didn't have much time left, I think, to build. But he was a preacher of righteousness and telling people that judgment is coming. And yet, it ended up no one believed, but he and his family, his wife and his 3 sons and their wives got on board that ark. And then God closed the door And we know from that account in Genesis 6-8, it was a violent, catastrophic event that covered the entire world with water. And the only ones that were saved were Noah and his family, safe inside of that ark. And so that has some real implications when it comes to science, because all around the world, as we look all around the world, we see evidence of water destruction. We see fossils, we see rock layers, we see enormous canyons and so on. Much evidence of the hydraulic events around the world. And that will be the topic of one of the sessions a little later in this series. So the flood left evidence for us. By the way, the fall and the death left evidence too, didn't it? All we got to do is look what's going on here with COVID over the last 2 years, and other diseases, and the evidence is by far, it's all over the place. After the flood, as the mountains came up and the valleys sank down, the earth was transformed really into what we see today. We believe there was a time for an ice age sometime within a few hundred years after the flood. And then we read about this event called the Tower of Babel. And we know that all of mankind came around that tower and they spoke one language, and they were able to build this. They were in the process of building this tower that would reach to heaven to make a monument to themselves and really idolatrous worship. And God said, enough is enough again. And this time he didn't bring another flood, but what he did was confuse their languages. And so people were scattered and spread throughout the entire earth after the time of the Tower of Babel. And then we see also after the time of Babel, we see the dispersion of the various animals that were on board the ark, getting to the various parts of the world. And I think that, well, we include that someplace else in one of the other lectures. We're not going to get into a lot of detail right now.
Right.
But at that point, we believe is when we first started seeing the characteristics that we call the racial characteristics being cemented into various families and so on. So Genesis, evidences of design. That's what Dave will be talking about tonight, is evidences of design. What do we do? Evolutionists even speak of the design of things. And yet, according to evolution, it's all random. There shouldn't be design. It's just randomness. And yet that design, we believe, points to a designer. And so we're going to be getting into that. We do have a free newsletter, Think and Believe it's called, and you can either sign up online, or if you want to call the office and get Gail to put you on the mailing list, she'll be glad to do that. And you'll be able then to get the hard copy.
What's your phone number?
970-523-9943.
Thank you.
And that includes the Kids Think and Believe in there also. That comes out once every 2 months, but we're always putting up other things on the website, and lots and lots of articles, and Brian keeps the social media, Facebook posts and so on going. So there's always something seems to be coming out of here.
Right. Well, one of the things on design you see right here in this picture is the blue Morphle butterfly. And I love that thing. We did an article on that in Think and Believe. You could see the date on that perhaps just a few years ago. But anyhow, you can go to our website for looking at different things and just put in the search function, blue Morphle butterfly. Even butterfly will probably take you there too.
You guys that are with Rocky Mountain Creation Fellowship, Bill Browning, and we took a lot of the information there. In fact, I think maybe that article was, did he write? I
do have an article in here written by Bill Browning from the Rocky Mountain.
Yeah.
He actually wrote that article, come to think of it.
Yeah.
And I've been using it ever since. So
can I give him one quick little? When we went to Costa Rica, Dave was so enthralled with these blue Morphle butterflies. He wanted to see one so bad, and he wanted to see it up close. So I started praying, Lord, let him see a blue Morphle butterfly up close. And next, before very long, this, yeah, there's
Oh,
one.
look at
Candy's got one. There you go. They're beautiful. So
Yep.
Dave we were at La Paz Water Peace Gardens. You might been there, Candy. And so this butterfly lands on his wrist, and the next thing you know, it's sitting on his beard. I guess he got to see one close.
Yep. That was fun. We actually put the blue Morphle butterfly in a set of four basically note cards for
Mhm.
thank you notes or whatever. And on the front is a picture of the blue Morphle. And then on the back is some specific design features of the blue Morphle. And we do that with four different creatures, two of which are from Costa Rica, with the toucan and then the blue Morphle.
Candy, you
Anyhow,
can put that up again. Show them. She's got the butterfly there that shows the front, the top part, and then when she turns it over, you can see what the underside looks like.
interesting why the blue is so intense, and yet you look at the underside and you say,
Thank
ooh,
you, Candy.
very different colored. And the blue Morphle butterfly actually is not blue, even though it kind of looks like it. But those little scales on that blue Morphle butterfly are actually intensifying the light, and it's acting and it's magnifying the blue, and it's bringing it out to the point that an airline pilot can see a group of blue Morphles from the air at 30,000 feet. So it's what an amazing design on that blue Morphle butterfly. Anyhow, yeah, we're going to be talking about this design. Did it happen because of God creating it or blind chance? Well, people says, well, blind chance, evolution, millions of years of it, and that produces design. I don't think so, and I want to go into that in depth tonight to some degree in a short moments we have here. But many people think creation is just a religious myth, whereas evolution is science. I'm sure you've heard of that before. And we hear that, but I want to say that evolution is really not science, but it's a philosophy of how we got here on planet Earth and it's called the naturalism, that everything has to be explained by only naturalistic processes with no God involved. So evolution is the pillar of that naturalistic worldview. Very important to understand that those who are committed to the worldview of naturalism must look at everything I'm going to talk about tonight and say, well, it must have happened because we're here. It must have happened naturally without God. That's what they're going to say. Let me illustrate. It's not really science. We talked about the Big Bang. Where did everything come from? Well, according to the Discover magazine, totally committed to the theory of evolution and naturalism, the universe burst into something from absolutely nothing. Zero, nada. And as it got bigger, it became filled with even more stuff that came from absolutely nowhere. How was that possible? Good question. Then they go on to try to explain it from a naturalistic viewpoint. But think about it. Nothing exploded. That doesn't sound like science, does it? And so we have to see that. People ask, can't we see evolution in action? And after all, look at the various different sizes and shapes of beaks on the Darwin's famous finches or antibiotic resistant bacteria, the peppered moth. Well, we're going to say that because that's coming in the next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about that. They'll say, well, if evolution isn't true, how do you get all the skin colors from black as black to white as white? We're going to cover that too, and a whole bunch of other things. And so it's very important. In fact, we're going to show you a pair of twins. One has very much light features. The other one has African American features. And you say, or and you say, what's going on here? How do you do that? And those are twins. And we're going to demonstrate how you do that so that you can show other people, because that's a big bugaboo for a lot of people. That what we can see is change, minor changes, but it's not the type of evolution that's going to involve a goo or a cell turning into you. And so we have to understand that. I believe the evidence cries out things were created with a design. And that's whether you're talking about the universe, that's Brian's topic next week, or if you're talking about the cell, DNA, all of the creatures we see today, that's the topic for tonight. Romans chapter 1 tells us that. It says, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even as eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Who are they? Those who would deny that God is creator. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Romans 1:22, professing to be wise, they became fools. And we see that so much when I go to a high school, university, wherever. Well, you don't believe in creation, do you? Everything happened by God, accident without God. And so those people who claim to be so intelligent, God saying this, professing to be wise, they became fools. Well, I see that with living creatures too. This is actually a single cell creature, and radiolaria, color enhanced. But as you can see, it's looking like it's through a kaleidoscope. We see design. And we see design. That's actually what that would look like under great magnification with the color added to it. All right. People say you can't tell if something was designed. Well, I beg to differ. When I look at a painting, I know that oil and canvas don't line up that way. So somebody imposed design on that canvas with paints. And I know it was designed. I could show it. And the reason I know it is because I saw my mom paint that. She was quite an artist, actually. Anyhow, we look at some of the natural world, we see design too. A spider web has silk 5 times stronger than steel, with twice the stretchiness or elasticity of nylon, yet it remains completely waterproof. Why is it so strong? Well, it turns out that strand of spider silk isn't one strand, it is a woven strand of many strands coming from the weaving factory on the backside of the spider. And nobody really understood what was going on until they realized all the different spinnerets working to spin these strands of fiber. And with the advent of the scanning electron microscope, we were able to see how certain things basically have worked that we had no clue. And that wasn't too many years ago either. We talk about dolphins in our seminars a lot. And keep in mind, a dolphin is a water mammal, has to keep warm. And it swims in the cold water. It could basically have problems. But how does it manage to keep warm? Well, it has a thick layer of blubber. And that layer of blubber is a very good insulator. And the poor thing would die from heat, internal heat, if it wasn't for a special cooling system. And that is the dorsal fin of the dolphin. In the water, the dorsal fin come in contact, and there's an exchange that goes on, and the heat is taken away from the water, but the water goes down. The blood that's cooled here now goes back into the rest of the body and cools the rest of the body system. It's a radiator system, and it's more efficient than the radiator of your automobile. I say I see design. Well, how do the naturalists explain it? This is Discover Magazine, once again, dedicated to naturalism, and they have to come up with an explanation. It says, this graceful mammal avoids such a fate, like being baked, only by slipping through the loopholes in the laws of physiology. End of discussion. Did you catch that? They didn't explain how it works. They didn't explain the tremendous design. They slapped a coat of paint on it and called it through something that sounds rather scientific, slipping through the loopholes and the laws of physiology. But it's totally devoid of explanation. And that's what we see very frequently, slapping a coat of paint and over it. We talk about the Bombardier Beetles. Lanny and Marilyn talk about it a lot. And basically, this comes a lot from the original teaching we had from ICR. And basically, this little beetle that's a ½ inch long can shoot out boiling hot water temperature, liquids and gases into the face of an approaching enemy. Wow. This is an interesting little beetle. How does it work? Well, it has storage compartments for two very special chemicals. And they store those things. These things are then actually pushed into a mixing chamber here, where these chemicals are mixed. There are several sets of valves and an explosion chamber, and the result is this thing can shoot with machine gun rapidity explosive gas at 212 degrees Fahrenheit into the face of an approaching frog. If you saw it at night, you'd see a flash of light. That is rapid oxidation, called fire. All right. And so it's really interesting to see that. How did the first beetle ever evolve that capability? You know, maybe it needed the chemicals, so it went to a chemistry lab, right? Started mixing chemicals, got the right one finally. So now you have a better beetle, correct? No, wrong. You have a dead beetle. So for millions of years, if evolution is true, beetles are blowing themselves up until they evolve all of the rest of the very important apparatus. Understand the chemicals really don't do much good without all of the rest of the system working in place at exactly the same time. You leave out one of those and you have a dead beetle. Sorry, it's just not going to work at all. And so I see creation, I see design, I see what an engineer would design, and God is our master engineer. The sea anemone has all of these tentacles. At the end of every one of those tentacles is a poison dart missile capsule. And there's a trigger trap door and a spring-loaded missile, and it has poison on the tip of that missile. And a fish comes along when that trap door opens, bam, this missile fires, paralyzes the fish, and this sea anemone gets a meal. It's pretty unique, isn't it? Well, I don't think you're going to want to eat the sea anemone with all those poison darts, would you? Anybody want to have a good plate of those tonight? No, probably not. But actually, there is a creature that eats the sea anemone. He's called the sea slug. And yeah, we dramatize this a bit, but he pounces on the sea anemone, eats it, digests everything. The only thing that is not digested are those poison darts. And so what's he going to do with all those things? They're rattling around in his stomach. Well, you notice that the sea slug also have tentacles, but no ability to manufacture its own poison system. Isn't that interesting? So it ferries or transports those poison darts up into its own tentacles. And once put in place, the first fish that hit one of those tentacles opens that trigger, bam, this missile fires, and now the sea slug gets another meal. And so what you are looking at is a creature which pirates the sea anemone's missile system and uses it for its own. Big question is, how did that happen? By slow and gradual changes, mutations over millions and millions of years. I say it looks like they're God designed, these creatures, so they eat and keep from getting eaten, etc. And so God is very involved with this creature. You know, Gary Parker likes to use the woodpecker a lot. And it's really an amazing evidence of design as well. It is a living jackhammer, really. It makes his living pecking hole in trees, etc. And he hits his head against a tree with a force so great that if it wasn't for special design features, his eyeballs would pop out, his beak would fold up like an accordion. And there's a special shock absorber between its beak and its skull. And that keeps his brains from rattling or scrambling his brains, you might say. Also, there's a film that closes down over his eyelid every time he hits his head against a tree. That keeps the wood chips out and the eyeballs in. Extremely important. But you might say, what a dumb bird hitting his head against a tree. Well, he's hungry. And basically, here's a bug on the inside of the bark of the tree. He's going after it. But keep in mind, bugs aren't entirely stupid. They live on the inside of the bark of the tree. They hear this woodpecker coming. They would be able to escape down one of its tunnels, except for one very important design feature of the woodpecker, and that's the long tongue with sticky barbules on the tip of it. And that bug gets stuck to those gets stuck to the tongue and comes back into its mouth. And now he's got a real problem. What do you do with a bug stuck like glue to your tongue? Well, there are special enzymes within the mouth of the woodpecker that instantly dissolves that particular glue. Very amazing thing. And the interesting thing is the length of that tongue. It is about 4.5 times longer than his skull. What would you do with a tongue that long? You know, the woodpecker has no shirt pocket to put it in. And so here is the special storage compartment. The tongue comes out of the back of the mouth, wraps around the skull, and attaches up here in the beak region. It is stretchy like a rubber band, and there are special muscles that pull it down into the chest cavity. And so you say, which came first, the special storage sheath that this tongue fits into, or the long tongue? What good is one without the other? You heard Lanny testimony a little earlier this evening, and this is the one thing when he heard Mary Jo talk about that in a seminar, he asked the question, how do I, as an atheist, explain this? And he started realizing, you know, I better start doing some research. And that's at that point where the life began to change from his atheism back to a solid belief in the Lord Jesus Christ and that you can believe the Bible. And so this is so important. He will always use this particular example in his lectures. And so if you want to hear him talk about it, you can see discovercreation.org. Go to the kids page. It'll be there. The eye is amazingly designed. And if you don't believe it, just take it out and look at it. And don't do that. No. But you know what? There are so many things. We had somebody from Costa Rica who's a eye doctor, and Dr. Fred Lane. Anyhow, he's done amazing presentations coming from one of our training classes, but he did an amazing presentation on the design of the eye. And he could talk about just even the cornea, just this little thing you can hardly even see. He can talk about that for an hour. And he gets so excited about the design of the eye. But what answers do the evolutionists provide for, say, the design of the eye? Well, atheist Dr. Richard Dawkins says, oh, well, he's got to find some kind of fault. He said, well, it's an absurd design, if it is designed at all. Absurd. Why? He said, why? There's a mass of material right in the line of vision. If it was moved over to the side of the eye, you could be able to see further and better in a dark room. Well, he's kind of right. There is a mass of material right in front of the vision. But what he doesn't tell you is that mass of material actually provides a UV protection for that eye. Not only that, it's full of fiber optics that take the vision and translate it to the back of the eye. All right. I think I'm not going to try to answer that. Anyhow, interesting, because if Dr. Dawkins would walk outside the way Richard Dawkins thinks it ought to be designed, he would be blind in about 2 hours. So I don't think Richard Dawkins is correct in his videos when he talks about absurd design. Now, Richard Dawkins also talks about another one that he calls the height of stupidity. He says, why? Do you realize that you breathe through the same tube that you swallow food with? Why you could choke to death. And so he calls this whole design of this apparatus the height of stupidity, which I would not want to face our God, our Creator, and tell him that. Okay? Interesting. Yep. It's a possibility of choking, but how many listening tonight actually choked to death today? Of course, none, right? And basically, something is working. But if Richard Dawkins thinks it's so bad, how would he design it? I believe it's superbly engineered with many different functions happening all at the same time in one very small compartment. You know, superbly designed like a Swiss Army knife. You know, I couldn't even be speaking here tonight if it wasn't for this particular design, because speech is important. You have air that's very necessary, correct? And that comes from your lungs, but also so are your teeth and your tongue and the position of the tongue with the roof of the mouth and with the teeth. It makes speech possible. How many tubes would Richard Dawkins have to have in order to work and not choke to death or something else like that? And what would Richard Dawkins do if he was swallowing something with a different design and he didn't have that lung capacity? How would he get a piece of food unstuck if it got stuck partway down? Would he send a plunger down? Oop, oop, oop. Or maybe send a fish hook down and pull it out? What would he do? And so I think God knows what he's doing, putting everything together like a Swiss Army knife, many functions in a small space. That tells me we have a great designer, engineer there. And so think about a computer, how amazingly designed it is. But you know what? Even my computer or your computer that you might even be listening with tonight doesn't come close to the computer that's found in your skull. Your brain is much more designed. In fact, if it's much more designed than a very highly sophisticated design system, then your brain is designed as well. This book called The Design and Complexity of the Cell talks about the total number of synapses in a brain roughly equals the number of stars in 1,500 Milky Way galaxies. Boy, that's a bunch. And according to this book, a single human brain has more switches than all the computers and routers and internet connections on Earth. And just to think, evolutionists say it just happened that way. Well, how does naturalism say it? How do they explain it? Well, here's what they say. Perhaps an early cell billions of years ago developed a sensitivity to other cells. Then it is conceivable it would be on its way to becoming a human brain. There it is. It's explained. Now, those who believe in naturalism and many university students will now say, oh, yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Anything is possible, correct? Well, they say that, but not logically. And by the way, there are two words that are not very scientific here, perhaps and conceivable. No, those aren't scientific terms at all. But naturalism has to resort to this type of storytelling in order to explain some very difficult things. All right. How many have heard that a lot of the junk DNA in your body is junk? Anybody out there?
I've heard that.
Oh, yeah, many really have. 98.5% of your DNA, according to some textbooks and many magazines, is junk left over from millions and millions of years of evolution. Well, it turns out, you're going to hear, the junk DNA is not junk anymore. They used to think that because they did not do the research. When they did more and more research, they found out it is extremely complex, extremely well designed. It is in itself a computer programming language system. Dr. Robert Carter actually did a video on the high-tech cell. He calls the cell, or the DNA here, the most complex information storage mechanism in the known universe. Whoa. They're now trying to copy that and to make storage systems for computer data. And in fact, they are able to do it. And they're able to do it okay, but it's the retrieval that's a little harder for them. And but it seems to be working. Here's what Dr. Robert Carter says. The genome is a multi-dimensional operating system for an ultra complex biological computer. Multi-dimension, he actually shows it's actually four-dimensional, this whole thing. It's not just a straight little ladder or a twisted helix type ladder, but it's actually a higher dimension than that, 4 dimensions. Wow, this particular computer has a built-in error correcting and self-modification codes. This is absolutely amazing to understand that. I would love it if my computer can correct itself. It doesn't. There are multiple overlapping DNA codes, RNA codes, and structural codes 22,000 or so protein coding genes uh, combine, or you might say combinatorially, how many possibilities there are, create several 100,000 distinct proteins. Now, naturalists are going to have to explain how this all happened strictly by accident. And the plot really does thicken. You can get this particular DVD from our office there, actually. It's only $10 for that DVD. But call our office at the number we gave you earlier at 970-523-9943. Gail can get that out to you. So here's the big question. Let me ask you, how many have heard the big buzzword in evolution to explain all of this design? Let's have your input, okay? Don't everybody speak at once.
Natural selection,
Natural selection. Working on what?
mutations,
Mutations. What's a mutation?
Something that's gone wrong.
A mistake.
A mistake. It's an accident. Might be a copy error. Might be a duplication. Mistakes usually don't result in something better, do they? But they say, well, occasionally there was a good mistake. And what you said, natural selection or survival of the fittest, may have then saved that, okay? Even the atheists recognize all this kind of design, and they say, and they even call it design, but I said last week, we say designed, quote, but it really isn't. Why? Because naturalism says we can imagine how mutations in natural selection acting over millions and millions of years might refine or even produce systems. Did you catch a couple of words here? Imagine and might. What are those not?
Scientific.
Scientific terms, right? Oh, but you know what? You have to have a mechanism in order for this whole thing to work. Mutation and natural selection has been the buzzword for literally decades and decades, okay? And the problem is researchers now found out mutation and natural selection doesn't work. Dr. John Sanford, one of the top research geneticists around the world, actually says this whole thing is a myth, that evolution proceeds by mutation and natural selection. And he actually mathematically shows it. It's in his book, easy enough to understand with anybody, with people with just a little bit of background. He puts it in words that's easy to understand. So this whole idea that evolution proceeds by mutation and natural selection, he said, is false, and you can reject it, is what he's saying. All right, now that's a subject for another one of the evenings, okay? A little bit about that. All right, but now what we have to understand is there are certain things that it just taxes credulity to believe it could happen strictly by accident. And that's where I'm headed right now. Are you all with me? You ready to proceed? Thumbs up. Okay. All right. Dr. Burgess wrote a book some time ago, Inspiration from Creation, and he talks about the flight of the dragonfly. And it's amazing because, you know, it's a better flyer. It has better operation skills than our best helicopters and any other flying machine. It can lift 25 times its body weight, which is better than our aircraft. So how does it do that? Well, basically, he talks about it, but he also talks more about that dragonfly a little bit. And it's kind of I like what he says about it. He says, this dragonfly, it's like a submarine in a larval stage that is also an amphibious vehicle that can climb out of water and then turn into a helicopter without any factory or group of mechanics to help. I think that's great. And yet, the naturalists will have to say, yeah, but millions of years of natural selection actually produce something that is better than our own technology right now. And what they're doing is studying this in order to make better joints, putting more robotics in, artificial limbs, the whole thing. So I say if you have to study God's design, then it was designed in the first place. How many got a cut in the last 100 years? I think we all did, didn't we? The reason we didn't die was because of our blood clotting system, okay? And we have a substance in the blood called fibrin, the light part of that first word. The fibrin is actually what's going to produce your clot. It's a long, sticky molecule, grabs a hold of the blood vessel, and when you get enough of that together, it forms a web or a net across the blood vessel, and that stops the red blood cell, and they dam up, and that's what's going to make your blood clot. And so I thought, this is an amazing system. But wait a minute, what happens if you have a bunch of fibrin in your blood right now? Well, you're going to die. You're going to plug up blood clots throughout your entire system. So fibrin has to exist in an inactive form called fibrinogen. All right? Very important to understand that. But what happens if you have how do you activate this thing? Because it won't work unless it's activated. Well, a substance in the second word called thrombin activates the fibrinogen, produces fibrin, makes the blood clot. But what happens if you have a bunch of thrombin in your blood? It activates all the fibrinogen and you die again. Okay? That don't work or doesn't work. So what happens? A thrombin exists in the inactive form of prothrombin. What activates it? An activated form of the Stewart factor. Okay, I'm not going to go into more detail, but all of these things plus a whole lot more are all necessary. Every step has to be activated. The entire system works or none of it works at all. This is an amazing type of a cascade type system, and it shows how things had to have been designed by a master engineer. Anyhow, I don't want you to go out of here tonight thinking, oh, that's simple. But how do you even activate one of these things, like an activated Stewart factor? Here are the steps, and each of these have sub-steps. And everything works in order to activate that Stewart factor. If you eliminate parts of it, you don't have blood clotting. It's just that simple. And so it looks like a very highly complex, highly designed system. I call that evidence of creator. Most of you probably have heard of Behe, Michael Behe or Behe, talking about the molecular motors and how you have 40 different proteins roughly, and how these things work and they actually produce an electric motor, and basically all based on proteins. And the motor turns at a flagellum, and it rotates at about 100,000 revolutions per minute, propelling the cell through the water so it can go find some food. Pretty interesting. It has all the parts of an electric motor, and it is much more efficient than our electric motors. So what does naturalism say? Well, Scientific American explained it. And if I talk about this at the university, they'll say, didn't you know that Scientific American magazine answered that design argument? Well, actually, what Scientific American did was show how perhaps one portion of this might have been borrowed. Well, they had to have been borrowed from something simpler, correct? That's what they say, because that's what naturalism needs. But what it failed to do in their argument, they may have explained maybe 10 proteins. They didn't explain the order, the working. What they failed to show that there are 30 other proteins all working in universe, or all working together in order for this to occur. And so this is definitely an irreducibly complex system. Okay, so Scientific American's argument basically went like this. Perhaps, or we can imagine that this might have happened. That's not a scientific argument. It basically is throwing some paint over the top of it and saying, ah, we explained it. And now the students parrot that. So sad, but I see that all the time at the university. Okay. I want to go into one little aspect some of you may have heard me talk about, but many people have not heard me talk about this at all. It's an area I've gotten excited about. And you know, molecular motors is just one of those things, okay? But do you realize if you look at the end of your finger, now take a good look at the end of your finger and show everybody. And do you realize that the end of your little finger has more molecular motors than all the electric and gasoline motors combined in the entire world? There's a lot of them there. They're in every cell, basically. There are over 20,000 types of molecular machines in humans alone. And these are literally molecular. You're not going to see them with the microscope in general. These are molecular. They're smaller. But with the advancements in technology, we can see that it is working and how it kind of works. You have the propellers, the motorboats, the flagellum that Michael B. talks about, but you also have folding machines, you have valves, force generators, pumps, energy producers, this little thing right here, labeling machines, delivery, computer centers. Whoa. Did you know that's going on inside of every one of your cells? Virtually all of them. This is interesting. Let's think about it. Let's think about one such motor. This is what's called the ATP synthase right here. Now, don't worry about the terms. Okay, don't worry about it. Some big words, but get the idea is all I want you to do tonight. All right. You're going to try to produce this thing. And what this thing is going to do is grind a couple things together. So this is a grinding machine working on a molecular level, all based on proteins. And you're going to produce energy so you guys can stay awake. Okay. Okay, now here are the first steps. First of all, you have to have your DNA in place and operating, which is an amazing computer program. Now, computer programs don't happen by accident. But in order to produce this particular, say, one protein that's going to go into making up, I'm going to go back one here, this particular machine, which is made up of 30 proteins, we're going to look at just making one of the proteins, okay? And how it's going to get put into place. In order to do it, you have to take your DNA molecule, which in one cell, if you were to pull it apart, it will occupy about 3 feet. 3 feet, that's pretty big. But it's so tightly packed within the nucleus of your cell. And what you first need in order to code for the protein, you have to unwind that thing. So you have to have an unwinding machine. But keep in mind, once you unwind it, there's a section of this thing that you need now in order to code for a protein. There'll be a section to code to tell how to make this thing, the computer programming language here. So you don't use the original. You make a copy of the original. So you have to have a copy machine, okay? Oh, now you've got some way to snip the copy. So you have to have a cutting machine. But then at that point, now we got to get it over to someplace else within the cell. And this is micro. This is actually on the molecular, almost atomic level here. So you're seeing it's a long ways across the cell. You're going to have to call the UPS. That's your transport machines, okay? You have to have a delivery to take the copy and bring it into what's called the ribosome. Ribosomes are the little tiny blue, darker blue polka dots. Okay, those are called ribosomes, okay? And the ribosome is a machine. Now get this, you are trying to make a protein. You're going to try to code a specific protein. But what about the ribosome? It involves more than 300 proteins and RNA complexes in order to even make one protein. Are you seeing, wait a minute, you have to have proteins to make protein, right? Oh, okay. So those little polka dots are so important, okay? They're protein manufacture machines. It takes the code of the DNA, and what it does, it shows what amino acid is needed at exactly the right place. And you might have a protein of a simple one of 200 amino acids, which all have to be present in order for this to work. But you have to have all of these things, and this thing basically cranks it out. Okay, put this amino acid in, put this one in next, and put this one in next. And then now you have a big long string. All right, the big long string. But now time to call UPS, because this long string isn't really that functional. It has to be folded to a precise shape. Now you have to have a folding machine, and keep in mind, you have to have the UPS delivery to actually bring it inside of this folding machine. And it's going to go through this folding machine, coming out to the exact shape. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we aren't there yet. So once you get it out of that folding machine, you have to call UPS again. We've got to deliver this thing now to the right part of the cell as one of the proteins in 30 proteins to make up this energy making molecular machine. All right, now this is a machine there are 32 protein based, there are 32 proteins. It has two distinct rotary motors joined by a stator, kind of like the molecular motor that Behe talks about, and it's all powered by protons. I like what David Godsell says here. He's a cell biologist, molecular machine modeler. He said this is one of the wonders of the molecular world. All right. This particular synthase machine, this rotary engine, spins at over 9,000 revolutions per minute. Takes one chemical, puts it with a protein, and when it does, out pops an energy, which is very important to keep the cell alive and you alive. And that energy has to be delivered by another UPS guy to the other parts of the cell. So this is absolutely amazing. Now, we are talking about calling UPS, and they're not just floating around. UPS, the parcel service, has to have a highway to travel on. So inside the cell, they now realize there are other proteins that are making microtubular highways. So you might say there's a highway construction team going on inside of that cell, and you can't even see it unless you're using the most advanced type of systems now that are even more sophisticated than the electron scanning microscope. All right, so here it is. So you have to have a highway construction to go from one part of the cell over to where this protein is needed. All right, so now you get the UPS guy to go down that highway. So it has to know exactly where to go. It's not just carrying one protein, but a UPS truck has a lot of packages in it. It's going to deliver a whole bunch of different packages to different portions of the cell. They have to know where in the cell it's going. So there's a labeling machine on the protein that was now recently folded. And this guy isn't just walking. And we actually can see this particular kinesin transport machine. We see what's going on when we use sophisticated equipment. And it takes about 100 steps per second. That's like me running at 1,200 miles per hour. And think about everything going on. Just think about the complexity. How did that happen strictly by accident? Howard Berg from Harvard University says it this way: these are the most efficient machines in the universe. Now, I beg to ask, does this look like evidence for design? I was doing a lecture at a University of Minnesota, and we had in our audience the most outspoken atheist in that part of the country. In fact, he even spoke at a big gathering of skeptical and atheist students in Cincinnati. And this particular atheist, Mary Jo, went online to hear what this guy was saying. So how, he said, are we going to win this battle against Christianity? Did you catch that? Battle against Christianity. How is he going to do it? And he didn't say you've got to learn the evidence. You've got to be really equipped with evidence. No, he didn't say that at all. He said, you have to learn to mock. So they're winning their argument by mocking the person who says this thing was designed. So they're mocking Howard Berg from Harvard University, probably too, right? And anybody else that can mention the word design. Wow. That's so sad. We see that at the university all the time, people mocking. And I see evidence. But when this particular atheist was in our audience that night, it's amazing. We had tons of people praying, really, literally, when we found out he was in the audience, that a prayer went out to all kinds of people. And basically, he didn't say a word. He's been noted to absolutely dominate a speaker's program and basically mock right in the middle of it. And outbursts and things, but he was totally quiet. We think prayer helped, but also his wife was sitting next to him that night. He might have had sore ribs or something but finally, question and answer time. He actually asked a question. He says, I came here this evening because this was a lecture on design. I haven't heard anything that is evidence for design at all. And unless you give me evidence for design right now, I'm going to throw up all over the seat in front of me in the auditorium. Okay. There was an engineer in the crowd, just kind of shouted out at that point, give him a bag. So I think it was kind of funny. We run into these situations occasionally. And but he was learning to mock. He was mocking, and that's the way his disposition was. Anyhow, do you want to add anything that, Mary Jo, or not? Okay. So how is this answered? What is, besides mutation and natural selection, the hero of the plot? According to Dr. George Wald, clear back in Scientific American in 1954, it says time is in fact the hero of the plot. Why, we have 2 billion years to work with. Given so much time, the impossible becomes possible, the possible probable, and the probable virtually certain. One has only to wait. Time itself performs the miracles, and that would be the miracles of mutations coupled with natural selection. Wow. Ever since he said that, students have been parroting that. I go to the universities and they say, mutation, natural selection. Of course, we have lots of time to do that. And so we keep parroting the time being the hero of the plot. Well, you know, there's a lot of things we could talk about with that, but we're going to get into that. I'm going to pick on Richard Dawkins one more time. Do you remember I said that the ribosome is actually going to code for a protein? It's going to tell what amino acid to put in the right spot. And when it's all done, you've got a long chain of amino acids. And Richard Dawkins says, wait a minute, there are 4 different ways that you can get the same amino acid called glycine. 4 different ways. That's wasteful, just absolutely redundant. Well, that's what Richard Dawkins says, and now students parrot that because they hear it. Because in biology classes, in high school, etc., they're teaching nothing but naturalism, and they're teaching Richard Dawkins' worldview of atheism as well, and naturalism. But he is right. There are 4 ways of getting the amino acid glycine. For him, it says there can't be a creator. For us in the creationist movement, we might say, I wonder what that last letter is. Why are there 4 different ways? What does this one different letter do? And sure enough, the research has now been done. Remember about the precision, the folding machine to fold that particular string of beads that's going to become a protein into exactly the right shape? That folding machine is very interesting because this last letter controls the degree and the timing of the folding. So here's another dimension of this DNA code, and that dimension is timing, a time zone here. And so all of a sudden, no, it's not redundant. It is very, very important. Here's an article for those of you who want the technical detail. Frontiers in Genetic, this article right here. Redundancy of the genetic code enables translational pausing, folding, degree of folding, etc. So there it is right there. You know, when we look at what they call junk DNA, Mary Jo made a prediction years ago. Some of you may have heard her say, I assume the stuff that they call junk is not junk because God does not make junk. I say, go back to the drawing board, do more research and find out if it really is junk. And it turns out the best known research right now is showing that by far the vast, almost 100% of what they were calling junk DNA in your body is not junk. It's very important. Has extreme important functions. So remember, the DNA codes for the right amino acid to be in the right spot on this long string of maybe 200, maybe up to 4,000 beads in a string to get different proteins in your body. Some of them are monstrous. Do you realize it takes a lot of faith to believe that that string of proteins came about by accident, and that's not even a cell? I calculated this and showed it to my class in college university statistics I was teaching. And I showed the probability of evolving a simple protein was 1 chance in 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 260 times. And that's a very small protein. And I said to my class, let's compare this probability with the number of marbles that it would take to fill the entire known universe. And it would take only 10 times 10 times 10, 84 marbles. So this probability of making one simple protein is like hiding a blue marble in a universe filled with red marbles, and then blindfolded finding it 3 times in a row. And if you could do that, it would be 100 million times easier than making a simple protein. At that point, I said, I don't know what they teach you in the biology class about these kind of odds, but in statistics, we call this probability of making even a simple protein 0. Okay, it's not going to happen. And by the way, that's 5 minutes before I heard from the department chairman. He accused me of preaching religion in a classroom. And no, I showed him exactly what I told the students. So glad to do that. And but he said, you better drop it. This is a touchy subject here at this university. Well, I didn't drop it, and that's why I can do this full time now. Okay, and yet it takes DNA to make proteins. It takes proteins to make DNA. Which came first, the chicken and the egg? And that wasn't even a cell. That was just one protein, one tiny piece of a cell. the chance was calculated of how to get a cell, a simple cell, what they called simple, which isn't simple, by the way, by an atheist and an agnostic. And the chance they ended up coming up with was one chance in 10 times 10 times 10, 40,000 times. And they said, wow, this is kind of like a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and producing a Boeing 747 complete and ready to fly. And wow, amazing. It's not going to happen. They then were quoted in the newspapers as saying there must be a God. Well, they didn't run out and buy a Bible to find out about that God. They said in the article, we are still looking for a way around our conclusions. Why? Because they are sold out to naturalism, the worldview, that everything has to be explained without a God. Okay, so no matter what kind of argument you hear, naturalism is what you have to teach in the university if you're a college professor. Well, at least they think they have to. Dr. Scott Todd was basically, he was in a court case, Kansas, and could intelligent design be taught? He was arguing, no, we can't teach intelligent design. He said this, even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such an hypothesis is excluded from science because it is not naturalistic. Time out. Students are being put in a naturalistic box, aren't they? Only think you have to explain everything by science, whereas so many things they're finding out, especially when you look at the interior working of a cell, there's no naturalistic explanation whatsoever. That's why I say evolution is not science. It is a philosophy, naturalism, a no God system, but it's posing as if it were science. Colossians 2:8 warns us, see to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and vain deceit. I say evolution is philosophy. So we can take Colossians 2:8 saying, don't be taken captive through philosophy. And I like what Dr. John Morris, a friend from the Institute for Creation Research, says. He says, it's a wonderful day to be a Bible believing creationist. There are so many articles coming out, so many, all showing the complexity of the cell, showing how, in my book, they could not have evolved at all. And so I say evidence of designer. You know, I can't understand somebody saying that I did not give them evidence for design when I had given a lecture very similar to what you just heard tonight. Okay, but it's more important not just to grab the science, but this is more than a scientific issue. It goes a lot deeper. I think we need to find out who this creator God is. Just who is he? We find out by looking at the creation. As it says in Romans, God is an artist. Well, it says look in the creation. He loves beauty in the flowers, in the plants. Look at the ducks. It could have been a black and white world. But why such beauty? Unless God wants to show us some of his creative ability. Okay. And not only that, you look in the insects and the plants, look at all the things, but look at the microscope. You see the intense beauty. It turns out that so much of the beauty is evolutionists answer. The reason for beauty is natural selection coupled with mutations. But where is there natural selection in a droplet of water with microscopic creatures that have no eyes to see, no eyes to behold? And why do we see it? Why such intricate detail inside of the cell? I think the closer you look, the better it gets. That's the sign of a great and awesome creator God. The DNA is an amazing thing, but even when you think about all the other things in the cell, it gets even better. God is a God of detail, and that's what I see. So he's interested in the details of each and every one of our hearts and our lives, isn't he? He is a God of detail, but he's also a God of the big picture. Look at, look at what Hubble saw. This is the part of the sky that could be observed by holding, or can be obscured by holding a grain of sand at arm's distance. That was revealed by the Hubble telescope. That's amazing. And most everything of what you are seeing here is not just a star. They are galaxies. There are galaxies, how big it is. And God says in Psalms 147:4, God numbers the stars. He calls them all by name, and he created them. It shows his power, doesn't it? Wow. But the verse next to the one that shows his power, verse 3 of the same Psalm 147, says this God heals the brokenhearted and binds up all their wounds. I love that. He is a God that's powerful enough to do something about our wounds, our hurts in our lives, etc. That's the kind of God that is worthy of worship, worthy of our praise. So I believe all the way through, the evidence is really crying out. Things were created with the design. They couldn't just happen. And yeah, you can believe your whole Bible when God says he's creator God, right from Genesis 1:1 all the way through Revelation. Okay. Keep in mind, this is part 1. This is basically the first of 6 parts. The next week, I believe, is astronomy, and Brian is going to be talking about that. That is, if he is up to it. I mentioned the COVID, and looks like he and the family is showing the signs after they were exposed to it this last weekend. So anyhow, but otherwise I'll swap programs with him. And that's next week on astronomy. Okay. And then this in person, how do you share it with your friends? Maybe you want to teach a Sunday school class or somebody else, or a small group, or a Awana group, something like that. We would like to help you learn that with a hands-on thing, with plenty of field trips, picnics, museum tours, etc. So it's going to be a wonderful thing to do. Or join us for the third part, or just only for the third part. You can do that as well. You can join us for tours of the Arches National Park and also Canyonlands National Park. You can go ahead and do that too as well. So again, go to our website, discovercreation.org/training, where you signed up, and you can actually sign up for all this stuff. All right. Don't forget our free website, etc. And I just want to mention something. We talked about our Costa Rica tour. Unfortunately, we missed it too. And I know you're going to miss it if you wanted to come this year. But sign up for our Yellowstone creation tour, where we see amazing sites with tremendous amount of design throughout that entire weekend. And you can pick which weekend you want. The first weekend is August 26 to 30, or you can come to September 2 to 6. That's a Labor Day weekend right there. And so you want to go to discovercreation.org/camps, and you'll see that, camps and tours.
Those
All
camps,
right.
by the way, one of the best things about the camps that we've found has been the fellowship time. And
Oh,
just
yeah.
being with other believers, going on these tours together, you get to know people and you create lifelong friendships really through these tours.
We have another camp also listed on our website in Colorado in the mountains at Grand Mesa, just outside of Grand Junction a ways. But that's a gorgeous camp too to go to. And it's at Twin Peaks. Richard Stepanek and Lanny Johnson will be leading that one. Mary Jo and I and some volunteer staff will be leading the Yellowstone creation tour. Okay, so we hope we can see you, and please spread the word. Spread the word about all of this stuff, okay? And get other people involved. So Mary Jo, you want to?
Yeah,
I rambled on enough.
yeah,
I think
we're pretty well over time, but if anybody has a question or two, we'd be happy to take them. If you need to leave, we understand. We kind of went over time today.
I wonder how we did that. I've given virtually the same lecture at a university or at churches in 40 minutes.
You got to stand up. That's the key.
Oh, that's right. I was going a little too slow, and unfortunately I was dying of thirst and I didn't want to stop.
Uh-huh.
I had a
Anybody have
question.
any questions? Yeah, Joe.
I have a question. So these are amazing, facts and evidences that definitely point to a creator and a designer. And we like to, in my group that I lead, we like to, look at things. As if we're in the position of teaching somebody, of helping somebody to understand these things, and as you presented, is there a good way to kind of collect these facts, these evidences, these that we can then share with other people? Because I don't think I would be able to memorize all these things. But are there resources that we can kind of use to then share with others, not just the facts, but like the quotes that you had that other scientists or other even what would you say about that?
Yes, you want to answer that, Mary Jo? In fact, I'll say first, you don't have to memorize all this stuff. Pick one or two.
Mm-hmm.
Pick one of your favorite, and basically go run with that one. Yes, you'll be able to memorize that one, and pretty soon you've got 2 or 3, maybe 4. And so that's not too hard. Don't feel like you have to do it all at one time. All right, very important to understand that, but get 1 or 2 of them so that you can actually share, and especially the ones you like.
There's also a couple of books that we highly recommend that are about 5 minutes a day, just to take one short
Yeah.
creation example every day. It's like a daily devotional for a year.
Okay.
Those are by Julie Von Vett and Bruce Malone. And one of them's called Have You Considered? What's the other one, Dave? I forgot the title.
Evidence. It is inspired by the evidence.
Inspired Evidence. Yeah, Inspired Evidence. Those are on our website in the store. They're excellent.
There's
And
one of them right there. Hardback, and it's full of color pictures. In fact, every page, every day, you have one. There are 361 or 365 days there. And so you don't have to memorize it, just 1 per day or whatever, and share 1 or 2 with different people. And it's a wonderful, amazing book. So you can get that from us. It's hardcover and we sell it for $14. That's just something that's amazing there.
That'd be a great way for you to do it, is just to take that Have You Considered book And, you know, read one in the morning and think about it, and then see if you can share that with somebody else during the day, what you learned off of that one.
Right.
And it gives you good practice to read it and to think about what were the main points, maybe 2 or 3 points about each thing that you might want to remember. You wouldn't have to memorize the whole article. These articles are really short too. They're just enough. I bet it wouldn't take more than 2-3 minutes to read through them. But
Probably not, but
if you're going to really think about them and so on, then, you know,
Yeah.
obviously it's going to take longer, but that's an excellent series for you that, now that's in a little bite-sized pieces.
Right.
There's other books that we can recommend that take things more in a topical way, or, you know, we could give you a whole list of books. We also have our DVD series, the AOI Discover Creation series, and that's great for Sunday school groups or youth groups, home groups, where what you could do without having to memorize it and put together a whole presentation, you can use that DVD set along with the study guide that goes with it, which will give you then all kinds of information. And you can become more of a guide that way, to be able to just, be able to share the information and be there to answer questions and lead discussion.
this one has literally references from every one of the 12 DVD sessions. The quotes are in there as well, and that you can read it. You find the source, all that is in there too. And that's a study guide that goes with that one. Basically, we will include that 75-page full color study guide with all those references, etc. They show you the pictures, etc. That all works. And by the way,
also, for each of those lessons in that series, there's a review section at the end each lesson, and it will give you the main concepts for that lesson, along with questions that review the content. And that's basically just, you know, answering questions about what was in there. But then there are also discussion questions and some homework projects that you could give people. And so utilizing that DVD set is a great way to get started.
Yeah.
And you build your knowledge then by answering the questions, and if you don't know, you say, I don't know, I'll get you an answer by next time.
Right.
And then you get on our website or ICR or CMI or
write us an email.
Yeah.
Whether it be Dave Nutting at discovercreation.org or Brian Mariani, whatever, or call our office 970-250-2923.
That's your number, not the office.
Oh, 970-523-9943. Is that right, Mary Jo?
Yep.
I usually tell my phone, call AOI.
Now, for those of you that have a little better science background, the genetic entropy that Dave just had up on the screen there by John Sanford, that's excellent, excellent, excellent. And it talks about the impossibility, really, of evolution proceeding by mutation plus natural selection.
Now, we didn't go into great detail. When I get into the fossil record, I'm hardly going to give it any detail at all on human evolution, because most kids don't need it yet. But if you want some of the latest finds on human evolution, this book called Contested Bones by Christopher Ruppy, and also Dr. John Sanford is in on that one too now. And basically wonderful detail. And it gives you that kind of ammunition. And you may not memorize the answers, the whole arguments, but you can loan somebody a book like this, put your name in it. You may never get it back otherwise, okay?
You
And
still
write
can-
down who you loaned it to. We've
always a
lost
good
plenty
idea.
of books.
Well, that's a good idea anyway, because then you can come back to them and get feedback from them
Yep,
and
exactly.
what they think, and do they have any questions and that kind of thing.
Yeah, they're good guidebooks that we have, the Grand Canyon, Bryce and Zion National Parks and Yellowstone National Park. We have an app of our local area of the start of the Canyonlands, basically. And that is the Colorado National Monument. But it's a tour app that you can put on your phone. Okay, and if you go to discovercreation.org, you can download that particular app. Okay, and it's a tour guide, and it's amazing what all is in there. One of the gentlemen who's a programmer actually did the whole backdrop, and we wrote lots of articles for that. And there's also sound, video, pictures, telling you what you're looking at, etc. We are in the process right now of making a tour app very similar to Yellowstone National Park. And but this is
It's a bigger
a lot
park.
more work. It's 100 times bigger than Colorado National Monument.
The big place.
So when you go to Yellowstone, do you talk about the origins of Yellowstone and the caldera and the volcanic eruptions and all of that, or where do you go with it?
Yeah, we do.
All of that, and
We do pretty much what any other tour guide would do, but we also show it from a creation perspective.
Mhm.
So a lot of information on the animals and the plants and the geology. And we hit, obviously it's in a short tour like that, we can only hit the main points. We don't get off the beaten track too much on that tour. But you know, when people
And
go
where
to
do you run the tour from, essentially?
we contract with a camp on the Idaho side. It's about 30 minutes south of West Yellowstone entrance. And so the camp allows us to, by working with that camp, we can keep the price very low for people. And
we do.
we're not putting a lot of money into hotels and restaurants. The camp provides the meals. There are cabins. It's a kind of a rustic camp. It's most time it's kids camp, but it's been plenty sufficient. And the good thing about it is that it's so close to Yellowstone, and yet it's affordable. And so
So you go into Yellowstone every day then and look
we'll
at
go in. Yeah, we'll go in. Some years it's 2 days, some it's 3, depending on a variety of situations. We had a lot of road closures one year, and so we ended up taking 3 days. Usually we'll do the South Loop in one day and the North Loop in one day. And then we have a third day where sometimes people want to go back into the park. You know, we have a day where at the camp, we have camp activities and some extra lectures and so on. And oftentimes we'll also go up to Earthquake Lake, which was a
heard of that.
giant landslide back in 1959, and you could still see the effects of that today. It's very, very dramatic, and I think it helps us to really understand the power and the amount of change that there can be in an environment in a very, very short time.
Mhm.
So
But
yeah,
this is a very affordable tour, and if you hurry up and sign, you can get the early bird special on it. And I think it's like $290 or $295 per person, $295 per person, and that includes the tour. That includes all of your meals and your lodging. So it's hard to beat.
they feed us really well. They provide. They give us a really good breakfast before we go, and then they provide lunch. that we pack and take along on the bus. We use a school bus. We don't have a big fancy tour bus, so it's not, plush. But again, that's how we can keep it affordable so that we can attract families that want to come and so on.
Mhm.
So I would really highly recommend that Yellowstone tour for any of you in
Right.
both from the standpoint of your own learning and your family, bring your family along or grandkids. But the other thing is the tour itself you could look at as another step in training, utilizing the natural world to really focus on creation.
All right, well, I need to go, so I'm going to sign off here. But
All
thank
right,
Okay.
Fran, thanks for joining us. I think
Yeah.
we're gonna sign off here quickly too. So
We
thanks for
sure
joining us.
are. Okay.
Candy, if you ever get over this direction, be sure to download that app, and if we're around, we could give you a personal tour of the Colorado National.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Yes. I haven't downloaded the app because I don't have enough room on my phone,
Okay.
Okay.
but I know
Yeah.
it's there. I know
I
it's
don't-
there.
I don't know if your Rocky Mountain Creation Fellowship ever does field trips, but
We do.
if a bunch of you wanted to come over sometime, we'd be happy to do either the National Monument, or if you want to take that weekend trip along with us down to Canyonlands and Arches, that would be just it wouldn't take too much time for people to get over here and go join us on that.
Yes,
That would be neat to do.
that would be, unfortunately, I think
What?
that's the weekend we have our meeting. But yeah, so we would have to look at the schedule and see.
Sure, yeah,
But-
well, otherwise, the other thing we could do is if you had enough people you wanted to do, and it doesn't take a huge amount of people, but if you had a few families or something that wanted to come over,
Okay.
we could take you on a tour. That would be
That
great.
would be awesome. What are you thinking in terms of like 20 people or 10 people or?
Yeah, 12,
Okay.
12, 20,
Yes,
whatever.
okay.
10 or 12,
What-
that'd be wonderful.
We'll work it out.
All right. That sounds
would-
perfect.
That'd be
Okay.
really good. We would really like to do more in conjunction with Rocky Mountain because, you guys we aren't that far away, but it's just.
I
Well,
know,
we consider
seems like
ourselves a
there's a big
sister
divide.
organization.
I know. And I consider you that as well.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and this is Ken.
Yeah, Ken's here
Hi,
too.
Ken.
And there is another creation organization here in Denver. And there's one in Colorado Springs and then one up in
Fort Morgan.
Fort Morgan.
Yes,
And
Yes.
so we've got several here. And I think Brian may have spoken at,
Yeah, he has.
He has.
Those.
I know he's been at, yes, he has. He's been at Fort Morgan, I know.
yeah.
And he's
Right.
working with you guys. You're going to possibly put together a youth rally through
Yes.
your group. That's coming up, I think, in May.
I think that is
Yes.
scheduled for May with Carl Kirby.
yeah.
That's
Yes.
great.
Yes,
That'll
yes.
be really good. Yeah.